we at the Fathering Project really love using that word mentoring because it's about what we're doing all the time. And I love this opportunity to meet with you guys and bring these two ideas together. The father's voice as a powerful mentor. So a little bit about me. Been married to that lovely lady in the red dress there, Justine, for 34 years. I've got 3 daughters, 25, 22, 18, and this year we're going to son-in-law. I've got a grandkid on the way. I've been a teacher and a bit of principal. I lived on the far south coast down in the Bega Valley area for 15 odd years. I spent 3 years from 2014 to 17 on a ship called the Mercy Ship. If you haven't seen that, have a look at that. But that ship has a school on the back for the volunteers, and I ran that school for 3 years. An opportunity to go to Benin, Madagascar, South Africa. Returned from that and joined the Fathering Project. I say that to let you know that I am a father. I'm on a journey about being a father, and I'm not a professional father, right? I'm still working it out, trying to go through. But I also like to talk about the teaching because my role has been as a PE and health teacher, and my work with fathers is about helping them to connect with their kids so that the kids can have better well-being. So for me, what I'm doing now is an extension in the health area from where I was working with the kids before. Now I'm working with the fathers because we recognise, and the research is very clear, that the family has a huge impact on kids' well-being. And I love the work that you guys are doing and filling in some of those gaps where there hasn't been a father or a mentor or a mother, and to actually give that opportunity to really influence all your mentees as they come along. Presently, I've just started in October a new community fathering initiative down here in the Port Kembla area, reaching out to dads who are doing it a bit tough. I'll leave it at that at this point, but that's what I'm doing presently. And I think that's how I've connected with you guys, just letting you know that we're doing that. This is a new program, Community Fathering Initiative. First time in Australia, we're going to have a physical place where men can come and get support for their role as fathers. First in Australia that we know of. So we need some volunteer mentors, but that's my little plug. If you want to get involved, see me later. So as I've said, I'm not sure how many of you guys are fathers. Might be, I think we've got at least one lady I can see on the line. But I always, when I start my talks with dads at schools across the country, I say fathering is a journey, not a destination. It's not about being the perfect father or father figure. It's about starting a conversation about fathering. And the beautiful transition for you guys is mentoring is that same thing. You know, if you're a mentor, you're about sitting, having a coffee, and there's power in the conversation. There's power in the story. And if you look at different cultures around the world, the story is where the values, the experience, the life gets passed down. And I'm really passionate about story. And tonight we're going to have a breakout and you guys can get to tell your story and talk about your journey with fathering. So that's coming up. But I really look forward to that conversation because to me, that's where the real work is. I'm just a speaking head, but when you actually start talking to each other, that's when the real work happens about moving forward from where we are. The Fathering Project has this bus principle, and there's a reason why I'm explaining this tonight. We talk about BUS, being there for your kids, showing them unconditional love and special, that's the bus. And we say, get the team on the bus. Now, as a mentor, I can see that you guys will be doing the same thing. You're being there for your mentors. No matter in the unconditional love section, whether they're being kind to you or being rough to you, you're still going to stick with your mentees. And each person we deal with are really strong, and I'll be talking about this later. Each person we speak to is really special and unique and has a place in this space. And I'll unpack that a little bit later. But one of the challenges we find as we go across is that this father figure or mentors don't exist. I don't think that's rocket science to anyone. There are a number of schools that I've gone and visited and to speak to the principals about setting up a fathering project. They said, this area has very few fathers. And that's what inspired me to do the work that I'm doing now with those areas where dads experiencing drug and alcohol, jail, all those things and just issues that disconnect them from the family. So that's what I love what you guys are doing in the sense of filling that gap for that absent father. So the father's voice. Let's just get into what I'm here to talk about. We are a research-backed organisation where the research started when Dr. Bruce Robinson sat with men who were dying from mesothelioma. He's a lung specialist. He asked the question, what are your regrets? And men said, I wish I'd spent more time with my kids. From that, he went back and did research and found out that there's a huge bit of research on there that says when fathers engage with their kids, it's better for the well-being of the children and the father going forward. So you as mentors are a powerful force for your mentees, for their well-being. I know you know that, but I think it's just good to put that in the context of tonight's talk. So we're going to do three things. We're going to look at this father's voice. I'm going to introduce you to my mate, or the concept of the Big Kev. And we're going to talk about K2, the climbing mountain, a bit of a story around that. Then we're going to have a breakout group and come back for one little session after that. All right, the father's voice. What's that voice that you have, maybe your father or a mentor that's from the past? What is the father's voice that you hear in the present, or that you are in the present giving forward? And what voice do you want to put out to your kids or your grandkids or your mentees into the future? And I want to talk about that voice in two ways. What voice is it that you're projecting? What voice was projected to you? And how loud is that voice? Now, I live in hope that one day I'll get sponsored by Volkswagen, but I put that up there because I often speak with men and say, whenever you're driving around and you've got to think about your relationship with your kids, and for you guys, your relationship with your mentees, and you see the Volkswagen symbol on the back of the Amarok, and I tell the guys, Amarok, I am a rock, that you ask the question, what voice, what volume am I throwing out to my kids today, and what voice do I want to leave with them in the future? So that's just my little mental trigger for you guys to think about, voice and volume. So now, this may be harder for some than others. Some might think about their father's voice in a really fantastic way. Others may have absolutely no voice at all. And they may not have had a father. So I know this can be a tricky discussion. So just hold that lightly. And when we go into the chat rooms, you might want to express that and talk about that a bit more. But we want to ask the question, what voice and what influences do you want to, that have been in your life, do you need to draw a line on and say enough is enough? Often we talk to dads, and one of the things that one of the guys said to me, one guy says, I was a father at 16. My dad was rubbish. My stepdad was rubbish. And I've come to this group tonight because I want to find out what it's like to be a man and to be a father. So he had drawn the line on his experiences from the past and wanted to move forward. So as you go into your groups, you might want to consider that question. What voices have been there in the past? What do we want to leave behind? But also, what do we want to take forward? And I'm sure all of us at some point have been, I'm not sure, but maybe many of us have been in that position where we hear what we say to our kids being what our parents said to us. And we're taking those things forward. And the question about what we take forward is, are we doing it intentionally or are we doing it unintentionally? Do we make a decision as to what we take forward, or does it just come through just because it's who we are and where we've been? So that's one of the questions to think about as we go into the group. What do I take forward? What do I leave behind? And am I intentional about taking some things forward? And am I just unintentionally taking things forward? In the present, those of you who have got kids now, be older or grandkids, what voice do your kids, or if you're a mentor, what mentor's voice do they hear? What volume is it? And I like to use this phone example. I think one of the greatest challenges families have is technology. And one of the voices or the behaviors, if you like, that I am always on this phone. Now, that's an unintentional thing that I've passed down to my family. What do I need? How do I model my behavior intentionally so that I'm not always on technology, so that our kids can see there's another way than just holding on to your phone? What are those things that you are taught? What do your kids hear? What will your kids remember about the things that you said to them? What will your mentees remember about the things that you said to them? So that's the voice. Now I'm going to give you some more examples a little bit later, but I wanted to talk about the process of how we make decisions. And I call it the big Kev, and I'll explain why in a minute. Normally when I do a presentation, I pull out a tennis ball and I launch it into the crowd. And 9 times out of 10, whoever it's closest reaches out and they've grabbed it. And then I ask the question, why did you grab it? And the usual response is, well, you presented it to me and I just reacted to it. I said, absolutely. We all, when we're presented with a stimulus, we always have a response. And that's no different whether it's being a ball thrown at you, or it's a conversation, or it's a mental health issue. Whenever we're presented with something, we always have a response. What I like to talk to people about is the fact that there is actually a gap between stimulus and response. And we do have often a thing called choice. So then I take that ball, it wouldn't be this spiky ball, it would be a tennis ball, and I throw it back at that same person. But I tell them they have a choice to either catch it or let it hit you. And then I throw the ball, and often the ball hit them. And I say, well, why did you make that decision? Why did you let that ball hit you? And they would say, well, I knew you've already warned me something's going to happen. You've shown me that it's a soft ball because I've already felt it. And you're challenging me to do something different. And therefore, I know that I can let it go and it won't be a problem. So what I say is, okay, you made that decision based on the big Kev. And this is my big Kev. Your knowledge, your experience, and your values. And my proposition, or what I throw out to you guys to think about tonight, is that we all make decisions on that way. Whether it's cleaning our teeth. When we're a kid, mum says, clean your teeth. You don't want to do it, but you keep cleaning your teeth. You get told that it's good to clean your teeth and it's good and healthy. But when you become 13 and you get on the bus and you turn around to that good-looking girl or guy, depending on what your preference is there, and you say hi and you haven't cleaned your teeth, your experience tells you that cleaning your teeth is very important. And because you value those relationships, you start cleaning your teeth more often, maybe. Whenever we talk about kids doing things, whether it be choices in regards to alcohol, drugs, sex, whatever it is, I've been teaching kids this for years, that you have a choice. And your knowledge and your experience and your values go into the decision. It's not just stimulus response. And that'll become a bit more apparent as I talk a bit more. But whatever the decision is, there's always consequences. And I often spend a lot of time talking with dads about that and kids about that. So we're going to just hold the big Kev in your head as we look at this experience of a climber. Some of you might recognize this mountain. It's K2. It's probably the second highest mountain in the world. Don't quote me on that. But a lot of the climbers like to claim this peak because it's a very technical climb. Peter Hillary is the son of Edmund Hillary. If you will recognise that name, he was the son of the guy that climbed Mount Everest first. So the story about the Thin Red Line and the K2 expedition goes like this. Peter Hillary took about 2 years to organise an expedition with 8 climbers to climb this mountain. And they basically, you can see there's a red line on top of the mountain now, hopefully. As you climb that mountain, everybody's strapped into that red rope. And as they're going up to this last section of the mountain, Peter Hillary looked up on the last day and he knew they were only hours away from summiting. But he looked up and he knew that if they summited, they would all die. From his knowledge of the mountain, from his experience of the weather, he realized that we had to abandon our attempt to get to the summit. Now, if you can imagine being the son of Edmund Hillary, you'd have a pretty big ego. And to actually look at those opportunities of going forward to destruction after leading this group for a couple of years and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get there, he actually made the decision to stop, turn around and go back, because the Father's voice he heard was, never be afraid to stand alone. And he turned around, undid his carabiner and started heading down. The other climbers said, what are you doing? We're so close. And he told them, and they said, no, we're not going back. This is our lifetime. We want to push on. And they pushed on. He got a call on the radio about 4:30 in the afternoon. They're all excited, had their photos taken because they'd made to the summit. But Peter Hillary's heart sank because he knew they weren't going to make it down. He describes climbing at night like climbing in outer space, and you can't see, feel, height, distance, and they all perished. One man came back. So his knowledge of the mountain, his experience, but then the thing that he valued was the voice of his Father saying, never be afraid to stand alone. So this to me is an example of how the Father's voice, the mentor's voice, can be something that when you are not present, you are thousands of kilometers away, that the information and the influence that you hold with people can actually make a significant difference to their safety and their well-being. And as parents and as mentors, we want to ask that question, what voice are we leaving, what influence are we leaving that is going to have an impact when we are not around? So I'm almost done this first section, then we're going to go into a breakout group. This is my story. So I've got the 3 daughters, and what my wife and I decided, we wanted to grow our kids up beautifully. But I'll tell you, I've got a big confession, and I've confessed this a few times. When my first daughter, Chloe, came out, she came out, and the first thoughts, I'm embarrassed to say this, the first thoughts I looked down, I thought, there's a bit missing. I was one of 3 boys, and here was a daughter. I didn't know how to grow a woman, how to grow a girl. So what I did in that space was I went to other guys and said, how do I grow women? And the advice I got was, just got to love them. So I just started loving my first daughter. And then my second daughter came along, and my second child came along, and again, it's a daughter. So here I am suddenly going, I've really got to get this growing women thing sorted out, because no one's taught me how to grow women. I've come from 3 boys. I know how that works. I don't know anything about this process. So the next bit of advice I got was teenage girls need to know that their fathers think they're beautiful. So I would tell my 2 daughters, you're beautiful and I love you. You're beautiful and we love you. Then we started to consider the cultural words that we were using. Beauty and love, when you put those into some of the music that was coming out, and my daughter started to dance to it, I thought, that's not the message we want for our daughters. It was well, I'll leave your imagination, some of the music that the young girls are getting into. So my wife and I, when I say our voice, we spent time to develop what is the affirmation we wanted to give our girls. So long story short, we came up with, you are beautiful, clever, strong, and loved. And that was our voice. In this case, it's the Father's voice that we reaffirmed repeatedly and repeatedly over the years with our girls. they would draw under their bunks. So I would get under there and write beautiful, clever, strong, loved by mum, dad. And I'd put it all there on the back of their cupboards. When they turned their cupboard around, there it was on every card, BCSL, beautiful, clever, strong, and loved. And this is the message that I gave to my girls, to the point where they were throwing their hands up as teenagers going, oh, dad. But when that young guy comes along and says to my daughters, you are beautiful, my daughters say, tell me something I don't know. The opposite side of that is when young girls are looking for that affirmation they haven't got from somewhere else. That can be a recipe for a challenge. So that's my story of my voice. We're going to go into our breakout groups now. I want you to consider this. What words or advice did you receive from your father or mentor? How loud or strong are these words still today? What will you leave behind, and what will you take forward?
What I said to the others was that it really tears my heart to hear from people who, for one reason or another, didn't have a father figure. I feel the pain because my father was someone who really did have a big influence on me. And I think it was as much by example, as much by things that specifically he told me, or things that, things that he specifically told me.
Look, it's fantastic when we get that and we can hear that stories, and we know, I mean, I'm been fortunate to have a father who was there as well. And I think it's what allows us to do the things we do. Unfortunately, the story that where I'm working with a lot of the areas is we're into third, fourth generation of fatherlessness or fatherless ineffectiveness. And when it comes to expressing your emotions and doing different things and relating to women and holding back tempers and issues around domestic violence, there's just not those filters because they haven't been taught those things. I mean, in a simple way, it might sound a little bit, I don't mean to belittle this, but playing rough and tumble with your kids teaches you kids where the limits of relationship, that's enough, stop. And if you don't have that rough and tumble, that can be a thing that you never learn. So you don't know when to stop. And that can have challenges all the way along. My father himself, he lost his father when he was 4 years old. So my grandfather was killed when my father was 4. And started this job, and I one day went, hey, Dad, who brought you up? And he said, it was at this age, this male, at this age, it was this person, at this age, it was this person. So that's why I think it's such a powerful thing with what you guys are doing, whether you're mentors or being mentee, you're filling those gaps. And that last bit in the bus principle, which is get the team on board, that's all those things you talked about, Augusta, all those other people around who can actually fill in. I talked to someone today and they said, it's really difficult when you get to teenage years because you want to push out and be an individual. And that's when you need those other youth pastors or youth leaders or, those people around you, school teachers that can fill that gap as you go through that stage in life. And the influence on the fathers and parents is harder or less.
Those teenage years or even early adulthood, you're tired of listening to your parents, and so those other examples that you mentioned, whether they're teachers or whether they're employers or they're sports leaders or church leaders, whoever, play an equally important role, perhaps a role that we don't really give enough credence to, David.
Absolutely, and absolutely. I often talk. We start off dependent on our parents, and that goes to about 12. And it's important that we're dependent on parents. But at 12, psychologically, for the survival of the human race, we've got to become independent and we've got to push away from our parents. And that's a natural thing, and it's really healthy. So there is a natural divide in those teenage years. But the ultimate success for you, or one of the things that helps you to be successful, is coming through that with a relationship and becoming interdependent again. When father and daughter and mother and father and family comes back together, it's a much stronger place. It's okay to push apart, but we actually do come back in. And that interdependence is really critical. It's never too late if your father is still available to try and get that relationship back. You know, sometimes we lose them for a number of reasons. But, you know, it's, as a father and you've got young kids, you can always start to reach back. It's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be perfect, but it's about that intentionality of trying to connect and to be there with them, which is as opposed to just living, just being and unintentionally not knowing where you're going. So, yeah. How do you tell your kids you're special? Well, I'll put it to you that I think often, and I've done it myself, you go, oh, you're awesome, here's a toy. I call that the Disneyland special, right? It's you're too busy, you go, oh, well done, son, daughter, here's a toy. You buy them off in a sense. So I want to sort of go through a little bit of a process of that's how you tell them they're special. This is our little proposal. So practical ways to build resilience, hope in your kids or mentees. And the thing with this 5 little steps, I believe works for your mentees as a mentor. Tell them they're special, but not Disneyland special. This one's going to be quick, guys. I'm going to keep it moving fast for you. What I say to dads, and it's what they don't expect, I say stop, step back, and watch and really look at your kids. Ask yourself what is truly unique about this person. And when you're looking, look for their special talents, their aptitudes, their characters, their strengths. I'm reading these, but I want you to think about somebody. And I want you to, whether it's a mentee or your own child or your grandchild, what are their talents? What are their aptitudes? Not just what can they do. What is their character? What is their strengths? How are they different to the other kids in the family? What do they like? What are their dislikes? What are their hopes? What are their dreams? What makes one child cry, another child laugh? One makes them scary and happy. How do they move? How do they talk? How do they smile? How do they interact with family and friends? I want you to really have a good look. There was a lady in New Zealand called Celia Lashley, and her big statement was that a lot of kids end up in jail to get dad's attention. And it's often the first time dad looks the child in the eyes is through the bars and saying, what were you thinking? And that's the first time they've got connection and the father's connected with that kid. So we ask you to, and I tell the dads, take a month, stop, step back and watch and look for the uniqueness of your child. Then I get them to go the next step. And this is something, even, I'll be honest, I've done in bits and pieces, but I haven't done it consistently, is to write down what you see. I've got a daughter who loves surfing. I've got a daughter who's an artist, and I've got a daughter who winds the windows down at the lights when the Mustang pulls up to smell the exhaust and hear the roar. But they're all different. Write it down. And you put it into books so you can share it with them later. Then once you've written down what's unique about them, reflect on that special, unique person. Ask yourself, and this is critical, how can this person, this unique, wonderful person, by being who they are, we don't want to change people, it's just who they are, impact the world in a positive way? Because once you start to think about that person and who they are, and then go, where's their place in the world? Who has ever done that for you? Has anyone ever done that for you? You know, has anyone sort of thought, right, David, he's all this, and I think his future goes like this. And I can point to my mother, I can point to my father saying, that direction is not for you. I think this is for you. What do you think? Find a place in this world that you truly believe they will thrive and value and add value to others. They might not go there, but what you're giving your child and your mentee is hope. So you've done that thinking, you've watched them, you reflected, you've written it down, you've thought about where they're going to be in the future. Then you invite them to catch up. If it's your kid, have a dad and kid date. If your daughter's 25, doesn't matter. Take her out for lunch. catch up where you can talk, take time, don't rush this. This is an hour and a half, 2-hour journey. A car trip's a good space, but don't do it while you're driving. Find time to stop. Take time to share with them and actually say, I see in you, and this is what Celia Lashley talks about, I see in you these things. Might be the first time they've realised that someone's actually taken time to watch them. I see in you these things, and I see this is your place into the future. I see you making a contribution. My artist, I tell her, your artwork is fantastic. I see the things that you do, and I can see you bringing grace and beauty into the world, lining hallways in offices or even in homes. But you bring grace and beauty. Whatever it is for that person, because we've taken the time to develop it, it's not just, you're awesome, here's a toy. It's actually stopping, looking, reflecting, and feeding back that they are okay. Stop and watch, write down what you see, reflect and consider their future, book time with them. To me, if you can do that with your mentees and you do that with your kids, you give them hope for the future. End of story. And then repeat it.
Dave, can I just make a comment on that? It's a really powerful thing that you shared, but I've also seen that power shared for negative reasons. I've seen parents, or maybe even well-meaning, speak foolish things, negative things into someone's life.
Okay, yeah.
One of our mentors, his father called him an idiot, I think when he was about 12 or 13, and for the next 20 years, he assumed he was an idiot, almost to the point of suicide.
Yeah.
And I've seen it even with someone close to me here, who wanted to go down a certain path in life and got redirected. So I think it's a powerful tool, but clearly it needs to be a positive, supporting message that we're giving, and not something spoken out of ignorance or Yeah,
and that's why I think it's really important to make that stop and take time and take, obviously it's got to come under an umbrella of love. It's going to have an impact, negatively or positively. It's going to be powerful. So what do we want that voice to be? One of my major motivations behind phrasing it like that for men is that many kids see a world which has unrealistic expectations, and they're not the Instagram perfect body, perfect image, and they can't see a space for them in the world. We have to say, that's not the real world. Here's your talents. Here is what makes you the unique person you are in a special way. And this is where I think you're going to go. They don't have to go that way, but it's like, I see value, and I see that in the future there's hope for you in this space. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges with kids, not having hope to fit into what they see. They don't measure up to what they see on Instagram or Facebook.
I actually had a mentor as a woman in her 70s, and she would speak such positive words, had a huge influence, genuine. It's got to be genuine. We cover Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Terrible name, great book. And one of the points he makes is always something that you can compliment someone for.
Yeah. And
she used to do this stuff, and it just helped build up self-belief, because I often doubt my abilities in many areas, but she was able to instill that confidence and help me, I guess, achieve things that I never thought I could achieve before with my own thinking.
We've got a programmed belief system that we've inherited from our mothers, fathers, our support network, and we've got to question that at times. And in order to evolve, we've also got to share and be vulnerable ourselves to know that we won't have the answers. We've got to be able to say to our kids, regardless of the age of them, I know you're not better than me. I know that you're thinking differently from what I am, and give them the power of affirmation rather than us trying to give all the time.
Yep.
And I see that in different ages. I've got a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old. So one's at high school, one's at primary. So they've got different mentalities. But I don't know if you know, I coach men for a living, and I see that in some of the men, depends on how they were brought up and their vehicle, they channel that because it's all they know. The programmed belief system, And when you start tapping away and show a more empathetic mind space, and I think this year has been a fantastic year for everyone to learn, then be prepared to be vulnerable. Be prepared to make an arse of yourself in front of your kids, to put it mildly. They'll enjoy you more. Be authentic a bit more, rather than trying to be perfect all the time.
We've got this little sign where Father's First. We've got, last year we ran a program, we got people to take out their title on their website, on their email, and put father and then their title, because it's that role of being your father is more significant than work. It's that idea that shifting yourself over and remembering what your major task is. So you can have really good experiences and quality experiences and good holidays. They're important and they're good if you can afford them. But if a child has a question and they don't get that question answered by their significant other, parent, whatever, they'll go and find that answer somewhere else. They don't get answered the first day, it'll become a bigger thing. And by being there in quantity and building that relationship, they'll say, oh, dad or mum or whatever, or uncle or grandpa, I've got a question about this. And then you've got a chance to answer it. And that little thing gets resolved, put away in the cerebral, in the brain somewhere. That's answered. If it's not answered, it can go unanswered for a long time, or it can be answered from the internet. It can be answered from the schoolyard. It can be answered from the workplace. So that's the idea of that, not letting lots of things build up. Quality is, still have those quality memories. We talk about having, kids and dad dates once a month where you take your kid and you go and do something with your kid one-on-one. And that's a quality time, but it's no use doing that once a year. It's a frequency of it. So does that make a bit more sense?
I got to take something to the tip. You don't do it by yourself. You put a kid in the car. Hey, I don't play the radio in the car. So my kids recently said to me, we're not a music family, but that means we get to talk. And as you're doing that, things come up. Every dad who bemoans having to spend 120 hours with their kid driving them is an idiot, because the government structured it so your 16-year-old that wants to get independence and is about to take that independence with your car and leave you is wanting to spend 120 hours with you one-to-one for a year. Embrace it. Embrace it as much as you can. And so it's just doing stuff with them and talking. And, sometimes that talks a lot and other times it's nothing, but you're getting to know one another. And then here and there, things come out, and you don't get those conversations and those permissions to speak into someone's life when you're at the Easter show riding a roller coaster and saying, I'm spending money and we're doing something fun, therefore it's quality.
One of the things we say about being there in the bus principle is let your kids, don't just assume they know that you're going to be there for them. Let them know that if they get into trouble at 2 a.m. when they're 16 years old, that they can ring you and you'll be there to pick them up. But that doesn't stop at 16. That goes on and might be, and I'm not giving you advice, Ian, because I'm a lot younger man than you, mate. My beard's not as wise as yours, right? But that idea, just letting them know, hey, if you need me, I'm here. I love you unconditionally. I think you're special. And, we're here to help as a team. You've got so much knowledge, experience and values of your own. I've got some knowledge, experience. Come and talking about Big Kev, and then just offering it up and then if they take it, they take it. If they're not, but at least they know that you're always going to be there. And that's one of the things we always say. Let the kids know, no matter what happens, you're always going to be there. I always end by saying I love starting the conversations. When I talk with Dad's group, I say, we're just starting a conversation about fathering. And that to me is where the wisdom is. As we've heard, now everyone's moved. Adrian, I think Adrian was able to put content in, I've learnt tonight. And that conversation we have with other men in groups like this, albeit it'd be better in a physical room where we can shake each other's hand, but it's still a powerful thing to tell story and to start a conversation about more than just who won the last football match and how fast your car goes.